Sanvanani Dumalan, good evening and welcome to the Monday edition of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Zamantungwa Khumalo. It's episode 425 of Private Property Podcast. And if you're joining us for the first time, welcome to the family. You can make sure that that you go to our Facebook page and catch up on all great episodes that you have already missed out on. And of course, to our regular viewers, from the Top Band gang members and to all of you who share and tag your friends every single evening when we are on, welcome to it. You know how we do. Every single weekday, you and I certainly have an appointment and are always in a conversation with a property expert who helps us navigate and make better property decisions. Doesn't matter where you are in your property journey, whether you're looking to buy, to build, to sell, you're a tenant, you're a landlord, this certainly is your one-stop shop on all things relating to property. And talking about your one-stop shop on all things relating to property, of course, private property is exactly that. And you can, of course, find incredible resources across our social media pages, including great shows that you can tune into every single weekday at 8 p.m. As it is a Monday, Chad will bring you the Home Shoppers Show, which takes you through exquisite properties that you can find on www.privateproperty.co.za. And he also comes to your screens every single Friday at the same time. And every Tuesdays and Thursdays, Mbalunoko brings you the farming podcast for all of you who've got green fingers that match with my outfit this evening, and of course the private property colors, so that you tune into her show to get your certainly your dose rather, of all things agriculture. And on Wednesdays, Esther Clausen brings you the First Time Home Buyer Show, where she's always in conversation with who not only walked that first time home buying journey, but have gone on to grow their property portfolios from strength to strength. And then there's myself, Zamantungwa Khumalo, coming to your screens every single weekday at 7 p.m. and tackling all sorts of property matters that certainly do make sure that we make better property decisions. And one of the things that we certainly love doing, and I know that I get inundated with this request, is of course taking a deep dive into the industry and different parts of the industry. With so many of you watching us who've been on, so certainly been watching us for the past 2 years and getting a keen interest in the property. Some wanting to transition to rent and really want you to find different ways of doing so and understanding different aspects of the property value chain. And this evening, you're going to get a great snapshot of something that we've spoken about and continue to emphasize the importance of, and of course, the property valuations industry. And if you still don't quite know what property valuations is all about, how it works, and if you yourself want to be a valuer, what the steps would be to get into it, and of course, the scarcity of valuers in South Africa, then tonight's episode is certainly for you. Joining us this evening is Malusi Mthuli, the president of the South African Institute of Valuers. Malusi, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Good evening, Zama. Thanks for having me.
It's such a pleasure to have you with us on the show. And I know so many people are already checking in on our Facebook page. Do keep the love coming. Do keep checking in. Of course, share the live. Send your questions this evening as we tackle all things property valuations. If you still have question marks or you don't quite know what this valuations thing is all about, then do drop us the text below. And Malusi, that's probably a great point to start on. You know, when we talk about the valuations industry or valuations, what exactly are we talking about?
So, Zama, valuations industry is an industry of just over 2,000 professionals that are legislated to determine market value in the market. So these are trained professionals that have actually gone through academic program as well as an experiential training program to acquire the necessary skills of being able to independently determine the market value of any property in South Africa and probably beyond.
You know, Victor, Malusi, one of the things as you started answering that certainly stood out is when you said around 2,000 professionals. I'm sure people who are listening were like, wait, did he mean 20,000? And perhaps before we even look at how to get there and whatnot, let's dive into, if it's 2,000, professionals, then that surely means that there's a scarcity of valuers in South Africa. Can you speak to that for us?
Yeah, look, Zama, there's a massive scarcity of values in South Africa. In fact, valuations is actually seen and has been identified as well by government, Labour Department, as well as the SETAs, Sector Education and Training Authority, as a scarce profession. That being that you only have just over 2,200, to be specific, in terms of professional values in the market servicing an industry. In South Africa, I think the industry size of property is measured at just under, 6 trillion. Rent. So it's obviously quite a massive industry. And if you have a reliance on values to be playing a part in determining value, you can clearly see that there's definitely a massive shortage of professionals that are there to undertake valuations. And if I speak to colleagues in the government sector, as well as in the private sector, you do find that there is that constant shortage of valuers. There's an even bigger shortage when you're obviously looking for specialist skills within the property valuations profession.
And when you talk about the specialist skills, what kind of speciality are you referring to?
Yeah, look, so there's obviously a broad range of property that you find in South Africa. You do find agricultural valuations, which in fact is a specialist area. Not everyone is able to undertake valuations in the agricultural space. So obviously it's a niche area of sorts, and there's obviously a limited number of people that are able to undertake or even qualified to actually undertake agricultural valuations. And then you obviously have a much broader space, which is your residential space. And then you obviously have another space, which is commercial property, which include industrial, which includes offices, which include retail. But even within those subsectors, you do find people that elevate themselves into a specialist area of, being quite good, perhaps in the retail space. There's also specialized areas like your petrol service stations, and again, not every valuer can easily undertake a valuation of a petrol service station. So you need to acquire a certain level of experience and some level of training to be able to undertake those assignments with ease.
If you've just joined us this evening, I'm in conversation with Malusi Mthuli, who's the president of the South African Institute of Valuers. We're taking a deep dive into the property valuations industry in South Africa. And of course, if you don't know what it is, looking at what valuers do, the nature of the business, also, touched on the scarcity of valuers servicing the South African property market, which I'm sure is also a ticking time bomb in itself. I think with so many people watching the show, we'll always advise you that even with your residential purchases, make sure that you get an evaluator in, especially if you're buying a standalone house, to ensure that everything is up to standard. Make sure that an evaluation has been done, and that, of course, your house is properly inspected to flag any issues that may come up. And if we certainly see the stage of the shortage of valuers, you can already imagine banks always have valuers because, of course, every time you buy a property, they send in their valuer to make sure that the purchase price being asked is, in fact, in line with what the value of the property is. And so a huge bulk is probably going to, servicing banks, and certainly, some of the smaller private firms. And you can just imagine how so many of us probably then do struggle to find values to work with on certain projects. And I want to find out from you at home, if you've ever used the services of a valuer, or if I know with a lot of people, some of them wanting to go into the property industry, have you ever considered valuation as a career path? I get asked that quite a lot every time we speak valuations, of course, speak to certain specialists. And we'll ask Malusi that, in terms of how does one then become a valuer, Malusi? If we're looking at under 3,000 professionals in the country, people are thinking, how, Kanti, is this brain surgery? Is it because it's so difficult that there is such a scarcity of it? A significant number of valuers in the industry.
Yeah, look, so there's a couple of dynamics at play. So in order for one to become a valuer, you obviously have to have a combination of academic training as well as experience. In some instances, you'll find people that are fortunate enough to actually get a job before they qualify to become valuers, and obviously work under the guidance of a professional valuer whilst studying to obviously complete the requisite academic qualification. And obviously where that helps is that once you complete the academic qualification, and with the number of years that you've obviously acquired through experiential training, you then are able to actually sit for a board exam and then be able to qualify as a professional in that way. And then there's obviously another stream where someone embarks on a full-time study. There's obviously a number of universities that obviously offer the study. That will be Wits University, University of Johannesburg, University of Pretoria, as well as Kaput, as much as they are obviously phasing out the current program. So obviously you can embark on that undergraduate study, and there's also postgraduate studies. You can even actually study all the way to doctorate and beyond, around the specialist field of valuations. Obviously, once you've acquired your degree, you can then, obviously register as a candidate valuer, and then obviously try and find experience within the market through collaboration with organizations like the South African Institute of Valuers, or just independent valuation firms, or in fact big employers being the banks as well as government, and obviously through that process acquire that minimum 2 years of in-depth valuations experience before you are then able to sit down for a board examination, after which you can then pass and obviously become a professional valuer. So there's obviously a blend of streams that you can follow in this regard.
And I think that's certainly exciting for those who want to explore it as a career path. I can see many of you tuned in and watching on our Facebook page. Victor Shabangu checking in there on Facebook. We've got Umo Rosenzuane saying, hello, family. Happy New Year. It's good to be here. Happy New Year to you. I mean, we're already on the tail end of February. So I think it's great that you're finally us, Rose. It's always so great to have you on the show. And we've got Utamzin Soganyile also checking in, Mary Gold Nyakane checking in, Glad Shirinda is also watching. We've got Mutlatso Mulaka saying, hi, Malusi, SAIV in support of your work, of our own. And that is, of course, giving a shout out to the South African Institute of Valuers. Katako Ahape, Paulina Nkosi also tuned in and checked in. And I see Mutlatso also adding that one of the specialities is even with airports. And I think that's probably one that so many of us wouldn't have thought of, that is something that is also a speciality in as far as the type of valuation you can look into. And I think, Malusi, when we then look at perhaps if we can reflect a bit on the past 2 years, I mean, we know that the property industry, every industry was certainly hard hit. The property industry was, really hard hit. We saw the different phases of lockdown, and as the world slowly started opening up. Before we can look at what could be possible for 2022, reflect on some of the activity that we saw in the past 2 years, and how, as an industry, you're able to essentially weather the tide and be able to come out, I think, certainly now where things are slightly better and the world is more opened up, and of course, more valuations are able to occur.
Yeah, look, I think just like all industries, the valuations industry was negatively impacted by the advent of COVID. And at this point, I'll probably just state that the average age of professional valuer currently that we have is in the order of 50 years. And as scary as that sounds, it is the reality. And with that, you obviously found that during this COVID pandemic, a lot of our members, and most of them are actually single men or single women run entities, were obviously confined to their homes. Remember at the beginning of the lockdown, pretty much all the work came to a halt. But luckily, as we eased up, as we opened the industry, I think a lot of clients were in support of valuers, to the extent that I do not think that a lot of valuation firms closed down. I think as a result of COVID, there may have been a handful of casualties. What I found was that there was a lot of catch-up, I think, in the work, to the extent that the volumes did end up picking up a great deal. And obviously, we do have a scarcity issue as it is. We do have a high rate of attrition through retirement, unfortunately death, as well as immigration. So all of those dynamics did obviously come into play in as far as maintaining the right level of demand for valuation services, both on the private sector as well as the public sector. So the valuers do seem to have had a good chance to recover, and it still continues to be busy for valuers.
We are taking your questions and comments this evening on the Private Property Podcast with myself, Zamantungwa Khumalo, as we take a deep dive into property valuations industry with Malusi Mthuli, the president of the South African Institute of Valuers. I see all the love that we're getting on our Facebook page from some of our listeners at home. I want us to unpack. There's a comment here from Mike Lombard, Malusi, who says, to the contrary, there appears to be that there is no shortage of valuers, considering every second real estate agent quite openly professes to be doing valuations. One can just scroll Facebook pages and you see the trends. The general public now drift towards real estate agents as their valuations are free. This needs intervention and addressing the larger population. Perhaps speak to the difference between, the estate agents, and we see this everywhere. I get called all the time with the different properties I own, saying, we'll do a free valuation for you, versus what a valuer actually does when they do a valuation, because we know there's a stark difference between what the two effectively do.
Yeah, look, I'm glad that the audience and Mark actually raised this question. It is a hot potato. It is a bit of a controversial area where we are busy engaging the Property Practitioners Act, or the council, obviously the body that's newly established as a replacement to the state agency affairs board. So there's a new CEO and a new board, and we're looking to be engaging them on this particular matter. Yes, there are a number of estate agents that are purporting to be giving the market valuations or property valuations. I do want to indicate that it is not within the realm, the legal framework of an estate agent to issue a market valuation. Only a professional valuer, in line with the Property Valuations Act, is allowed to determine a property market value in South Africa. Yes, estate agents can indicate or give an indicative value, or what is referred to as an assessment. Now, you must understand that a valuation process is an in-depth process that obviously has to look into all the checks and balances, the legal aspects of value, the economic aspects of value, as well as the physical aspects of value. And that is what a valuer is trained to do. You do find that a lot of estate agents go out to the market and indicate that they issue or they do valuations, only to find that it's a 1-2 pager. And that does not serve the purpose of a proper, thoroughly done professional valuation, to the extent that, the markets or people's reliance on an assessment as if it were a market value is quite dangerous because it may be misleading. I do also want to state that there are organs of states, unfortunately, even the courts of South Africa, as well as the South African Revenue Services, that usually call on estate agents to indicate or determine market value. Those are obviously the areas that we obviously engage in government to try and rectify that shortcoming, because it is completely completely misplaced and obviously not in line with the current legislation, Zama.
And I think, on that, Malusi, more questions and comments coming through on our Facebook page as we're looking at property valuations industry. We've got Usiabonga Sono, who, says, what is SAIV, or rather, what can SAIV do to protect our profession and jobs? Because really, agents have taken our jobs and are doing that for free. Is there any kind of intervention that as an institute you're able to put in place, Malusi?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest intervention that is required, Zama, is that of awareness, and the institute is is obviously putting all efforts to ensure that the publicity of the work of the valuer is there. There's obviously the Council for the Built Environment, CBE, where ourselves as valuers and all other professions like the QSs as well as the estate agents obviously fall under. We obviously have continuous engagements as well around the protection of the various fields. And I think there's clarity in what each profession is supposed to be doing. So we just obviously need to take those conversations that happen behind, the scenes in the boardrooms out to the market. And this is but one of those, I think, platforms and opportunities that we obviously have to lend the message that valuers are here to do valuations. Estate agents are obviously there to obviously help with the sale. Yes, they can give an indication of assessment, but when you obviously talk of a proper valuation, you have to look in the direction of values. So obviously publicity is one. And again, the universities are also helping, by obviously going out there and also showing valuations as a career. And we do hope that in good time, there's obviously going to be enough awareness in the market as well and recognition of the work of the valuer. Again, institutions like the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, for instance, which obviously, houses the bulk of landlords, if you think about it in the South African context, we're obviously looking to such organizations as well to enforce and also help as well in obviously identifying the work of the valuer in South Africa.
And I think sticking to that, I see we've got a number of valuers who tuned in and also giving their take on this particular matter this evening as we look at the property valuations industry. Rita McGowan-Shongwe saying those are desktop valuations, or desktop evaluations rather, the ones, of course, she's referring to the ones that estate agents would typically do. And Ungalula Willie saying, I believe evaluations of a property needs to be considered taking into consideration many areas. It's certain that almost every agent practitioner is a valuator. This valuation seems to be light evaluation, not doing a deep one. Where proper inspections of a roof structure, electrical compliance, and all are done. So that really does speak to it isn't an in-depth evaluation that you would get from a valuer, but if anything, it is a desktop valuation. And if anything, it really just gives you a sense of what the potential market price is. So it's not doing a deep dive into your particular property. And we've got Umutlatso Maloka coming back saying valuers can also be expert witnesses in courts, but agents can't. And of course, adding there to the difference between the kinds of valuations that you would find an estate agent doing versus one that is done by an accredited valuer. And I can see some of it we're getting from our regular viewers at home. A better obtained in there. Kutsura Muhlale checking in. Mutlato, loving the interaction from Mutlato. Again, she is a valuer herself, saying a valuation report is a legal document and is recognized by the courts as such. Agents' valuations are not. And this is a big one, because if you then have a valuation by a valuer, they themselves know that they are held up to the law, as Umalusi had also mentioned earlier, the act that governs the nature of the work that they do. Ulebone Masetsana Malupe saying, lovely and informative show. Thanks, Zama and Malusi. Great hearing from the South African Institute of Valuers. And we absolutely love that. Rita is saying, Sila, we are here. And that's, of course, all the valuers who are checked in and watching us this evening. It certainly is a pleasure to see so many of you in our comment section and really demystifying the work that you do as valuers and making people at home really get a grounding of the difference also that we tend to find when we deal with estate agents. And I know many of us, they'll say we'll do a free valuation. You even see some of their bill cards saying this, and you think the document, the 2-3 pager, as Malusi said earlier, that they give you think that that's something that's cast in stone or it's an evaluation, but actually it's not an evaluation at all. And I think, Malusi, then when we switch gears a bit, I think one of the big things is, of course, the rise of technology, the rise of and the way that we do things slightly differently because of the increasingly digital world that we're living in. I imagine one of the challenges potentially with an industry that has such a shortage is also having to physically be in the different places that you must evaluate. Perhaps talk to us a bit about the future of valuations in this increasingly digital world. I know the buzz comes in the fourth industrial revolution. What does the future of valuations look like, given that there really is so many of you physically, and we have to slowly start using tech in doing perhaps some of those evaluations?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question, Zama. I've just completed my research, my master's research, and it's in future studies, and the topic is around the possible future of valuations profession in South Africa towards 2040. And it's got to do with exactly that. How do we as valuers respond to the fourth industrial revolution? And my answer is very simple. Valuers need to take the fourth industrial revolution on their stride, because if they do not do that, someone else is going to do it for them. It could be someone not even from South Africa, from elsewhere. So I always, share the sentiments with our members whenever we have seminars and webinars. And I'm actually seeing a lot of it happening here in South Africa. The good thing is that we do have the protection of the law. But again, technology, as we've learned, as we've seen with Uber, as we've seen with a whole lot of other, innovative, disruptive programs, those programs actually don't know any bounds. So we need to obviously take this on our stride. And what does it mean? It means that we need to get into the finer detail in as far as property in South Africa is concerned. And I do know that there's expansive rural settings in South Africa and obviously some urban settings, and it makes it difficult to obviously collect data. But the focus, in my view, should be going into data and generating big data, because through big data, we can then be able to utilize that, in our valuations, still conforming with the legislative requirements, but obviously doing it a lot more slicker, a lot more smarter, and a lot more quicker. And obviously in doing that, if we obviously own this change and the disruptive change, will obviously defend, the valuations industry in South Africa to a great deal. It's not going to change that a professional valuation in South Africa has to be signed off by a professional value. So that demand is not going to change. So even if you obviously come up with very sophisticated algorithms out there to try and obviously determine value, and there are algorithms that are obviously out there. There is indexing, I think, which have also been quite active, in the development of. But at the end of the day, there's always going to be a need of a professional oversight in signing off a valuation, and you're not going to have a computer that's just going to be, determining market value of a commercial property or industrial property or retail assets, a specialized arbiter, using an algorithm. It is obviously too far-fetched. So I think what is important is for us as valuers to obviously get in on the industrial revolution, the fourth industrial revolution, get to understand the data. Let us be the ones that develop the algorithms, that are obviously used in the market. Let us bring in that aspect, that professional aspect that is required of us in as far as the determination of value, to ensure that whatever creation that comes out of the technology is actually conforming and falls in line with the with the valuation process. So that's all I can say on this topic, Azama. I think that's something that you certainly need to look at as values.
And I think it's such an important one. When you look at big data, you look at AI, you look at machine learning, these are components that we know we're not even just moving towards them, we're already using them in different ways, certainly different sectors as well. One thing that I would say, Malusi, the moment you're ready to spearhead that, I know one of the foremost thought leaders in machine learning and AI and big data in South Africa. He lectures at one of the universities. I won't put him on blast and say who he is, but let me know. I'll connect you with this person. I think they've been doing really incredible work in different industries, using tech, using AI and machine learning in really making sure that we innovate, but also put in the right systems for the output that we are looking for. Malusi, before I let you go, where do you see the industry going in 2022? I mean, we've now gotten to that stage where we've comfortably gotten used to operating in the era of COVID, knowing that there are times when you have slightly stricter restrictions, and then of course the country opens up. We've now been able to put in certain systems in our respective industries to kind of weather the harder lockdowns. But I think also with vaccines being widely available, we're anticipating not to have those kinds of lockdown. Where do you see the industry going in this year, and of course beyond that as well?
Yeah, look, I think the industry is certainly stable, and I think it certainly has legs to grow without a doubt. The thing about valuations is, the public sector is a constant consumer of valuations. For instance, you need to obviously have your valuation role so that you can determine your rates. So there is a constant consumer of valuations, even in spaces where government actually needs property to actually implement a public development plan, for instance. That is going to be a constant. And then when you look at the private sector, the biggest consumer of valuations would obviously be the banks, as well as the funds, the listed funds in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Now, when there is a downturn in the market, there's obviously some level of panic, and there's a constant reassessment of property value. So the demand for values actually increases even when the market is on the downturn and the chips are down. And when there's an upturn and when there's buoyancy in the market, again, the services of the values are obviously required, because a lot of investors are actually buying property, needing funding, and the funds are also growing and looking to acquire. So in whichever direction the market goes, the valuation service is constantly in demand. Okay, so from my perspective, the outlook certainly looks positive. The only concern that I have, and possibly touches on the point that I raised earlier, that the average age of a valuer is actually 50, meaning that within the next decade, at least half of registered valuers are either going to be retired or no longer practicing, right? Okay, now what this means is it's going to leave a massive void of valuers that are needed in the market. So what do we need to do? I think we need to obviously get out there to the market, spread the word around the need for valuers in South Africa, get a lot more young people interested, in the valuations field. We like to also see people changing their careers from either law, from accounting, financial, into property. And you actually find that there's a lot of synergies that these individuals actually bring to the field. So we need more and more, fresh and very unique thinking, to come into the space so that we can develop a lot more values in order to obviously sustain this constant demand for valuation services in South Africa going beyond. So 2022 certainly looks positive. I think that, also coming out of this COVID environment, a lot of investment is going to come onto the market, because obviously investors have been holding back on their capital deployment for the past 2 years. Now they have to deploy this capital in order to earn better returns. And again, the chosen, a sector would usually be real estate. And this is where valuers will be needed to obviously provide their opinion in order to inform those investment decisions.
Well, Malusi, I can certainly assure you, I think for people who are watching at home, a career to explore is in property valuations. There's a scarcity. And if you think you've got the temperament for it, then do make sure that you go to the Institute's website. They've got really great resources that can also help you think through how you can make that particular transition. Malusi, we're going to leave it there this evening. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Zama.
And that is Malusi Mthuli, who's the president of the South African Institute of Value, wrapping up a Monday edition of the Private Property Podcast with myself, Zamantungwa Khumalo. We'll be back on your screens tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. But I don't leave you alone at 8 p.m. You can look forward to the Home Shoppers Show with Chad. Until then, hoping you're staying home and staying safe.